priest and his teaching.
Doug is going to come and read scripture for us this morning. Turn in your Bibles to, what is it, Doug? 1 Kings chapter 3. We'll get you a mic, too.
Chapter 3, 1 to 15. Solomon asks for wisdom. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places, because a temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the statutes of his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place, and Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court.
I'm singing, "Don't build your life on the sandy land." In the days before Spotify and YouTube and all the other streaming services and iTunes, what was the only way, besides the radio, that you could get music into your home? Singing. So you could sing, yes, you could sing. Or you could go out and you could buy it. You could go out and you could buy a record. Yes, this is Dick Nolan's Truck Driving Man album from, I have no idea, but I paid a dime at the thrift store for it. So, and sometimes, if you wanted just that one song, you had to buy the entire album. right? Now sometimes there's a 45, and you can pick up a 45, but sometimes there were no 45, so you end up buying the entire album just for that one song. I suspect there are people in this room who bought an album just so they could play School's Out for Summer. Bought the entire album. Some of you bought the entire album Tub Thumper by Chumbawamba. Just so you could listen to Tub Thumping, not knowing there were 11 more tracks on that album, by the way. And some of you picked up Carl Douglas's remarkable compilation of 22 tracks called The Soul of the Kung Fu Fighter, just so you could listen to Kung Fu fighting over and over. You didn't listen to the other 21 tracks, you didn't care. You wanted Kung Fu fighting. By the way, those of you who are old enough to remember disco will appreciate that moment. Solomon is a little bit like that. There's kind of a one track that we were, oh, that's that one thing. He did that thing, right? He was the wise guy. Or, oh, he was the guy with 1,000 wives. I remember that one thing about him. Or, he's the guy that tried to cut that baby in half. And for those 2 women, you kind of know one track, one hit. And you forget, or maybe we just simply don't remember, that Solomon had an entire catalog. He had a discography of record, event after event after event in his life. So this morning, we're going to look at the discography, the catalog of Solomon. We're going to look at the musician that he truly was, or he truly was. And we're going to do this by looking at 3 albums, so to speak. First, we're going to discuss his discography, his entire life. Just a quick rundown of what he did with his life. And then we're going to focus on his most important track, the one that you bought the album for, the one that highlights and lives out of his life. And then we're going to look at the cover album that Jesus did of Solomon, because Jesus covered Solomon. He actually covered David. He covered a lot of people. He also had some great original stuff. All right, let's take a look at the discography or the life of Solomon. He is the 3rd king of Israel. First king was Saul. Second king was David. This is interactive. This is better than the TV we used to watch, because we can talk to each other. Although someone said, couldn't we just stay home and watch TV? No, all right, 3rd king of Israel. He is the son of David and Bathsheba. The first son perished because of David's sin, and this is the blessed second son. His mother names him Solomon, which means peace. But God told the prophet Nathan to call him Jedediah, which is beloved of God. He was 12 years old when he came to the throne. The passage that Doug read for us this morning, he was probably early teens to mid-teens when he goes to meet with God. We're not sure of his age at that point, but he's very young. And that's why he says, I'm a child in the passage when you read it. So he's very young when he comes to the throne. And his throne starts out rocky. His brother is a rival to his throne. And he's able to get control of the throne from his brother and forgive him. And the prophet Nathan anoints him as king. But there's some tension between him and his brother. And it goes okay for a while. But after he ascends to the throne, his brother rises up against him. And Solomon has him killed. So there's a bit of a difficult beginning to this throne. He's, like I say, he's late teens, maybe 20, when he goes to Gibeon to meet with the Lord there. And that's the passage Doug read for us. That's probably the passage you're familiar with. That he goes and God offers him the defeat of his enemy, wealth and riches. And Solomon says, grant me wisdom that I may rule justly. And God says, you have chosen well. And because of that, you will also be given victory over your enemies. You will be given great wisdom. So he is known for wisdom. And that's the story in 1 Kings 3, where the 2 women come to him. One of the children has died in the night, and they're not sure which one's which. And so they bring him, and Solomon, they said, make a claim. Whose child is this? And Solomon says, I will cut the child in half. And the one woman says, go ahead. And the other woman says, no, please don't. And he says, it's the one who said, please don't. That is the mother of the child, for she loves him with all her life. So we see an example there of Solomon's great wisdom. In 2 Kings chapters 5 through 7, we see him building the temple. The Ark of the Covenant, God's meeting place, is brought forward, And there the glory of God descends on the temple. And I know, Jack, you had a lot of days yesterday with a lot of calves, but they killed 21,000 oxen in celebration of the temple and 120,000 sheep. This massive, overwhelming number. And you can imagine in your mind's eye, if you've been to a feedlot with thousands of head of them just being sacrificed, and the celebration of the glory of God, and God descends, and they feast for 2 weeks. They live off that, and I suspect so much of that was taken home as well. So he celebrates, and he builds. He does what his father David couldn't do. He builds the temple. 13 more years, he builds his own palace, which is glorious and wonderful. He built cities and fortresses across Israel, and he has 700 wives and 300 concubines. These would become his downfall. And part of the final sin of Solomon's life is his relationship to them and their gods. This is a major factor. And after 40 years of his rule, he passes away in peace. He's buried with his father in the city of David, and his son Rehoboam rules in his stead. And his life wraps up in 1 Kings 11, verse 41. Everything else Solomon did while he was king is written in the book about him and his wisdom. After he had ruled for 40 years from Jerusalem, he died and was buried there in the city of his father David. His son Rehoboam then became king. That's pretty much it. That's a really quick snapshot of a kind of a high-speed tour. Remember when you took the 33s and put them on 45? Kind of zoom through the story. It is written this of Solomon. Solomon's reign is the pinnacle of Jewish history. Everyone is united. Their neighbors don't bother the Jews. In fact, they come to learn from them. There is peace and prosperity. This is as good as it gets for Israel, the closest ancient Israel ever got to achieving the messianic ideal of the ideal nation that would be a light to the other nations. This is the zenith of Israel. So that's kind of the discography, the life of Solomon, all that he produced. But let's take a look at his most important work, the album that you probably bought, the one that you remember. And it's a 3-album set. Remember those big? They were great. You folded them out, and all the graphics were inside. It was this big 3-album set. And that's Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. Thank you for reading that this morning. Yeah. I'm going to give you a snapshot into each of those so you get a sense of what this man was like. First, Proverbs. And we've been studying Proverbs, and thank you for coming out and watching and listening and doing that. It's been a fascinating study. Proverbs is the way life should be. The definition of justice within Judaism is when you look at a situation and you say, that's not right. It ought to be something else. You see someone who's hungry and you go, that's not right. There ought to be food for people. You see people being discriminated against and you say, well, that's not right. We ought to be treated fairly. That's Jewish. In the Jewish mind, that's the understanding of justice. If you can look at a situation and say, it ought to be, then you grasp the foundation of what justice looks like. And Proverbs is the way life ought to be. Let me read you just a couple. This is one that is near and dear to my heart. Proverbs 26:17. Like the one who grabs a stray dog by the ears is someone who rushes into a quarrel not their own. You ever try to grab a stray dog by the ears? It doesn't end well for you. You're going to get bit in the process. That's someone who rushes into a quarrel. It ought to be that you don't do that, is what Proverbs says. 11:17. Those who are kind benefit themselves, but the cruel bring ruin on themselves. That's the way it ought to be. Right? In the world the way it should be, the kind people would receive the benefit of life, and the cruel would have ruin. But you know that's not true. Sometimes the kindest people suffer the most. And sometimes the cruel benefit the most. And so Proverbs really is instruction on the way life ought to be. Ecclesiastes is what life is like. Because life is not always the way it ought to be. Ecclesiastes is life the way it actually is. Let me read you a few. 7:3. Frustration is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. Sometimes that's just the way life is. We get frustrated, and sometimes being sad is okay. 7:10. Don't say, why were the old days better than these? It's not wise to ask yourself such questions. Sounds clear? I remember the good old days when I could go to McDonald's and not wear a mask. Like, I love it because now I can wear my motorcycle helmet into the bank with the dark visor closed. They used to ask me to leave when I did that. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess he's got to come in. But, just don't take out a knife to open your letters when you do that. Bad decision. 9:9. Here we go. This is the summation of Ecclesiastes. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of your meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days, for this is your lot in life in your toilsome labor under the sun. He says life is toil and meaningless, so enjoy something. Enjoy the wife of your life. Because life can be toilsome. I use this at weddings, by the way. That's Ecclesiastes. Sometimes life is toilsome. Sometimes we say the wrong things. Sometimes we are frustrated. Ecclesiastes is a description of the way life is. And then, Song of Songs. Every artist does a love album, an album of love songs, right? This is Solomon's album of love songs. In Jewish culture, you're not allowed to read this book until you're 13. You have to reach adulthood before you read this book. Some have said this is analogous of Jesus' love for the church, but I think it's an important book because it is a demonstration of God's reverence and love for the physical relationship between men and women. This is the love song, the celebration of the beauty of love. And I'm just going to read one verse. Chapter 4, verse 1. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. There you go, Don. The rest of the book is a lot like that. So that's kind of his big three albums. Proverbs, The Way Life Should Be, the Audiobook. Ecclesiastes, The Way Life Should Be, The Way Life Is, the Aw Shucks book. And Song of Songs, this is the I Love You book. And that's where we have Solomon's work. And Solomon's best. Solomon's reputation, all of these track through with a single rhythm. It's like when you hear an artist, you know who it is. You can think, that's like him. And Solomon is about wisdom. Proverbs 2:10 sums it up. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant for your soul. Wisdom. For the last 3 months in our Bible study, we've been asking ourselves that question. What does it mean to be wise? What is wisdom? We are in a perilous season when more than ever we need wisdom as people, how to live, how to function, how to do business. How do we function in this season? We need wisdom as much, I suspect, more than ever. Let me give you a couple of quotes. One's from Dylan Wall. Knowledge is knowing tomato is a vegetable and
it has no place in fruit salad.
That's right. Wisdom is knowing it doesn't belong in fruit salad. Right. That's you may know what it is, but you got to know what it's for. Someone simply put, wisdom is to know and to live what is right and true. It is a combination of experience, knowledge, and judgment. You meet someone who's wise, and they're that remarkable combination of knowledge, of experience, and then good judgment. Wisdom, they say, is the one who knows they don't know. Because if you think you know when you don't know, you can't, what is it, Dylan? You can't fill an empty full cup?
Yeah, you can't fill a full cup.
You can't fill a full cup, right? I like what Immanuel Kant said. Science is organized knowledge. Wisdom is an organized life. And lastly, Charles M. Schulz, the author of Charlie Brown, wrote this. A wise owl sat on an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we like the wise old bird? Sometimes wisdom, we saw on Wednesday night, wisdom is being quiet and not speaking. So this morning I want to distill what wisdom is. Like the man who planted the seed and tended the field, and took care of the weeds, harvested, ground the flour, and made the bread and brought the loaf of bread over to you. I want to share with you a simple summary of what I've come to understand as we have studied Proverbs, as we have understood wisdom. I want to give you my conclusion without taking you through the last 3 or 4 months as we discuss this. So here's kind of my loaf of bread when it comes to wisdom, my understanding. Wisdom is making choices that lead to life. I'll say it one more time. Wisdom is making choices that lead to life. And let me unpack that a little bit, and there's a little thing we have to qualify near the end. But throughout Proverbs, we see Solomon saying, choose life. And he connects wisdom and life without, he can't break the chain. 6:23, Proverbs says, for the commandment is a lamp, and a teaching is light, and reproofs of discipline are the way of life. Wisdom is the way of life. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. He's quoting from the Psalms. 13:14. The teachings of the wise are a fountain of life, to turn aside the snares of death. Wisdom and life are always linked in Solomon's mind. 15:24. The path of life leads upward for the wise. And in 19:23, the fear of the Lord leads to life. And wouldn't you know it, Proverbs 3:16, doesn't it often land on 3:16? Proverbs 3:16 says this, long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Speaking of wisdom personified. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Those who hold her fast will be blessed. Solomon says wisdom is this woman who is wise, and as we walk with her, as we follow her ways, they will always lead to life. In her hand, she will always give you life. Wisdom is the path of life, the fountain of life. Wisdom is the tree of life. Now that should trigger some thoughts in your mind. So I want to put you this morning with that wise choices, wise actions, wise thoughts, the wise life will lead you to life. So I thought, okay, that makes sort of sense, and I started running it through the gristmill of my mind and my life, and I asked myself, is this true? Is this a fair summation of wisdom as Proverbs and as all of Scripture puts forward? So let's do a little test run. Is it wise to work hard? Yes. Because what does it produce? Life, right? Prosperity in your business, life in your home, hard work, we know. Not always. We recognize Ecclesiastes kicks in every once in a while. You can work awful hard if it doesn't rain. We understand that. But for the most part, it's wise to work hard because hard work will produce life. Is it wise to argue with a fool? No, it gets you nowhere, right? It absolutely no, because it won't help the relationship. You ever go on Facebook and try to have a discussion with someone? Well, it's just. I made a Harley joke, and the Harley guys got really angry at me, and I'm not going to argue with these fools. Just shut it off. Not even knowing, I know he drove a lift truck. I could just tell that if you drive a lift truck, nothing personal against me. It's not wise to argue with fools. It doesn't produce life. Is it wise to lie? No, it doesn't produce life. It kills relationship. Is it wise to tell the truth? It may be difficult, but it will produce life. What about a soft answer? It's wise, because it turns away wrath, and that leads to life when anger leaves the room. What about humility versus pride? Well, we know what happens with pride. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. We know that the life of humility produces life. And so as I ran this through Proverbs, and I began to run through my life and ask myself, when I made wise choices, what were the consequences? When I made foolish choices, what were the consequences? And for the most part, and again we'll get a little caveat, for the most part, wisdom leads to life. And that's why I'm convinced of this. That wisdom is the choice that leads to life. So if you want to know if the choice is wise, ask yourself, will the outcome be life? Life in my relationships, life in my business, life in my soul, life in my relationship with God. Will life flow from this choice? And if it does, it's likely that it's a wise choice. I recognize it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's something we can hold on to. Which leads us to our third element. Jesus covered Solomon. Because Jesus covered wisdom substantially. And he spoke very often about wisdom. And one of the great stories he spoke, one of the great songs he sang, as it were, was the one we watched. It's always hard to follow those Saddleback Kids, isn't it? Because they're so good. That is the story of the wise man built his house upon the rock. I can sing. The wise man. Otherwise, and the house on the rock stood. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon, and the house on the sand went flat. And what's the next verse then? So build your life on the Lord Jesus Christ. So build your life on the Lord Jesus. This is the parable Jesus tells us of the wise man and the fool. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. The rain came down, and the rain came down, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it didn't fall, because it had foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man. He builds his house on the sand. The rain came down, and the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell in a great crash. What does the wise man do? He builds his life on the words of Jesus, because the words of Jesus produce life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He looks at his disciples when others are fleeing, and he turns to Peter, and he says, are you going to leave me too? Peter says, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. To be wise is to build our lives on the words of Jesus, because Jesus' words produce life. He is eternal. And so wisdom will lead to life. And that's why I'm so rooted in this very simple definition. That to build our lives on the living word of Christ is a wise thing to do, for it will produce life. And so if you're asking yourself, is it wise? Maybe simply ask yourself, does it lead to life? Now here's the glitch. Here's the little caveat. Here's the one track that doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the album. And it's the one that you know to be true, for it's Ecclesiastes. Because sometimes even wise choices will lead to death. There are times we can make all the wise choices in the world, and life is not the consequence of it. As a matter of fact, sometimes the wise choice will intentionally lead to death. Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down their life for their friends. Let me ask you, is it wise to get up early, work hard for your family, grow your business, your family, and your farm? And we would say, yes, that's wisdom. But you know that's costly. You know that for you to get up early in the morning is to say no to self. It is the death of sometimes of pleasure. You come home, you're tired, and you're worn out, you're frustrated, increasingly, and you feel like something inside you died. Harry Chapin once said, we give up our sunshine so we can buy what we need. This sense that sometimes it leads to death, to our own self-interest, our own pleasure. It may lead to another life, the life of our family, the life of our business, but sometimes wisdom comes at great personal price. And Jesus shows us this as well. For the ultimate wisdom was the death on the cross. That was wise. And that cost him his life. Here it is love, not that we loved him, but that he loved us and gave his life as an atoning sacrifice for us. Scripture calls the death of Jesus a wise decision. And we would wonder, would the death of the innocent be a wise decision? 1 Corinthians 1:23 and 24 says this. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. The cross was wise. The death of Jesus was the wisest thing we could do. So we recognize, and my definition has a weak spot in it, for there are times that the wise choice you make will result in death. You will be tired, worn, weary. But the life of Christ flows from it. And so Paul cries out, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life I now live, I live by faith in the one who loved me and gave his life for me. The crucified life is the life we choose to come to the cross and to be crucified with Christ. That is a wise thing to do. So in this season, we are called to be wise. Called to be messengers of life to a dying angry, violent world. And we seem to be living in a world where there is an extra measure of fear and uncertainty and hate. Lawlessness and death seem to be the order of the day. A time when we call evil good and good evil. We live in such strange times. So what is the wise thing to do in this season? How will we as followers of Jesus live wise lives? What wise decisions do we need to be making? And how do we make those decisions? I put to you simply this: the decisions that lead to life in our relationships, in our communities, and in our own souls are the wise decisions. Wisdom is rooted in a relationship with God Himself. Wisdom is rooted in the cross, in our life with Christ. At the end of, or as a part of every worship service in the synagogue, the prayer leader prays the Amidah. This is the prayer of blessing for those who have assembled to worship. And part of this reads this, and this is my closing prayer for you this morning. God, you grace humans with wisdom and teach humanity perception. Bestow upon us your knowledge, insight, and understanding. Blessed are you, the granter of wisdom. God bless. Let's close this morning with a song.
Good girl, Trixie.